So you have the shell of structure and the heart of intuition. They were born as kin, really, but they grew up as total strangers. And then, in the age of industry, the shell turns its gaze back toward the heart. And what does it see? Well, it saw chaos and called it madness. It saw intuition and decided to call it disorder. This is the story of its flawed compassion, and really, the beginning of a long, painful convergence.
Okay, let's really dig into this quote because it's the key to understanding this massive shift that happened around the turn of the 20th century. You have a world built on structured industrial logic that suddenly turns its gaze inward, and it was just completely baffled by the beautiful chaos it found inside the human mind.
So, our first section here is about what we're calling a flawed compassion. This is where we begin with the shell's attempt to help, an attempt that was, well-meaning, but tragically misguided. It saw what it thought was suffering, and it decided to apply the only tool it really knew, measurement. For the shell, to measure something was a form of care.
And this was a direct extension of the exact same mindset that built railways and factories. The thinking went something like this. If the human mind can be understood, if it can be measured, then surely it can be controlled and fixed, right?
And this question right here, this is it. This sets up the central tragic conflict of the entire era. It's really a fundamental incompatibility between two ways of knowing the world. I mean, can a blueprint ever truly understand a poem?
This brings us to our next big idea. Beauty becomes a science. See, the shell's primary tool in this whole quest was classification. The goal was to take the beautiful, chaotic, messy art of being human and somehow turn it into an ordered, predictable science.
Now, what's really fascinating when you look at this slide is just how incredibly fast this new science established its authority. We're talking about a few decades, and a completely new framework for understanding the mind went from just being an academic theory to being the governing logic of institutions all across the Western world.
And you have to remember, from the shell's perspective, this was a profoundly compassionate, totally rational solution to human suffering. It saw itself as replacing superstition and neglect with scientific observation and actual treatment.
And this just illustrates the core strategy perfectly. If it cannot be measured, if it cannot be categorized and filed away, well, then it can't be considered real. The rich, inner world of the heart had to be translated into the cold, hard data of the shell.
But here's the thing. This new science created a new language, the language of brokenness. And this had a profound and often incredibly painful impact on the heart. It basically taught people an entirely new and damaging way to think about themselves.
I mean, you can see the clash right here in stark terms. Take hysteria. What might have just been an intuitive, deeply felt way of processing the world gets redefined by the shell's logic as a malfunction, like a broken gear in the machine of the mind.
So here's the crucial point, a different way of seeing the world, what we might now call something like neurodivergence, was officially classified as a broken way of seeing the world. It wasn't just different anymore, it was fundamentally wrong.
And this forced the people of the heart, who we're going to call the Fae in our story, to actually internalize this idea of being broken. The diagnosis wasn't just a label they were given, it became their identity. It was this fundamental belief that one's core self was flawed.
But just as the shell was building these really rigid cages of diagnosis, something completely unexpected started to emerge from its own technological progress. You could almost say a ghost was appearing in the machine.
So the official story of the time was all about classification and control, right? It was this relentless march of objective science.
But in the background, a whole new kind of connection, a new form of mass intuition was becoming possible. And the irony is, it was the shell itself that was building the infrastructure for it. I mean, think about it. These new mass media tools, silent films, radio, they were built by the hard logic of the shell, but they created a new kind of communal space, an intangible sanctuary where shared feelings and stories could exist on a massive scale.
By the late 1930s, you had 90 million people going to the movies every single week in the US alone.
Just think about what that number really means. For the first time in history, millions of isolated individuals could all receive the same story, the same emotion, at the exact same time. It was this disembodied, flickering connection, a ghost in the shell's machine, a whisper of shared experience in a world obsessed with individual diagnosis.
But it was a connection, and that was a game changer.
And this is the question that really sets the stage for the next phase of this whole collision. The battle was moving from the asylum and the doctor's office into the very airwaves and movie palaces that the shell itself had built.
So the shell's logic, it grew more compassionate in a way, but also way more invasive. And the heart's intuition, it grew more frantic, for sure, but also more creative, finding this new outlet through the shell's own technology. This acceleration was just pulling them closer and closer, forcing a collision. The heart was learning how to build, the shell was learning how to feel, but the balance, it was not yet struck. Not even close. The momentum of the past was just still way too strong.